U.S. martial law alerts. It had come to the shores of America quicker and earlier than what anyone in our country, White House, Congress, Senate, and the shadow government had expected. They were caught on their own land and trapped, and realized it was going to take them with it. This was one of the panic reasons why martial law was called. Similar to what happened with Katrina in Louisiana, happened all over America. It took America by surprise. Local law enforcement started clamping down on everybody. They came in massive trucks. If they were not dark olive in color, they were almost black. And the men that came out of these trucks were in full black uniform. Many of them spoke what sounded like either Mandarin or Chinese. Their facial features that could be seen throughout the open slot of the slit where the eyes are, called a baklava, were obviously Oriental. And there were also those who were very large, and the only description of nations that fit, one was Russia and the other German. They went in, and on the sides of the trucks you could see what looked like either was a plate, 3 by 4 inches, that had been screwed into the sides so that they could take it back out, or was something that could be laid over the surface like a laminate and replaced, maybe like a magnetic calendar as you would put it on your refrigerator. Long story short, the colored plates were on the bumpers, the cab doors, on the rear walls of the trucks, and on the rear doors. The color plates could be changed out as needed. They were red, they were blue, and they were yellow, and they were green. And to bring about order, they were commanded to round up people to take them to places where they could be safe. But when they went into the houses, they did not knock on the doors. You've seen how law enforcement will kick in the doors and use an iron unit that has handles on the sides to break the door in. When they came to places, that is, houses, condos, and apartments, they had a list of people. The reds were immediately eliminated. The blues were questioned, get all the information extracted, and exterminate them. Yellows, they were to be decided on. The colors of the truck showed their driver and his crew where they were going. They knew. They already had their assignments. Think of the Red River Valley big, huge beat trucks. They had the sides that are made of wood that can go up very high. Well, these were the same, so high that the people could not clamber out of them, because over the tops were either canvas tarps that were the same color as the truck. On most of the trucks had barbed wire going back and forth over the tops. If there was a red crew, they treated the people very harshly. They did not care what they did to them. The blues they treated the same way. The yellows they treated with a little more civility. Look at it this way. When the people came out of the trucks and they knew they were going for the reds, they were like wild packs of wolves. The same with the blues, only they were a lioness pack going after them because they knew they had to keep them alive long enough to get information. Yellows with a little more civility because they did not know which way they were going to go, as in they would recant their faith and be usable as set. Greens they treated with a little more civility because they knew this was going to be a group that would man the camps and the manufacturing that was located in the camps. They knew who the true-born Christians were. They know how they knew was not shown to me, but they knew. They also knew the political dissidents were. I put those quotes because they are the ones speaking out against the MWO, against anything connected to the New World Order. These were people who were flag-waving, rah-rah-rah Americans. This is a gruesome part. When the men came in and went into the homes of the Christians, whoever was the head of the crew, and I'm just going to share a little bit of what was done. If they came into a single occupancy, man or woman, let's say this is a man, they beat the man mercilessly. I mean, they were knocking his teeth out. They were breaking ribs and were, quote, unquote, having fun with him. And they were dragging these types of men out, throwing them like sacks of grain into the back of the truck. The men could not then sit, walk, or stand. The woman they raped and ravished until they could not stand. They were shown in their nakedness, bleeding from being raped so. Some of them were pregnant. They beat the woman badly until she knew her baby could not survive or was already dead. One of them would come up with a sharp knife after they had raped her and thrown her up against the wall. One would hold her and one man on each leg and a man on each arm so that she was flat against the wall. And taking this razor-sharp knife, they started down from the pubic area and very quickly come across a balloon shape and the baby would fall out. They had a child. She was told either deny your God or we're going to take your head off your baby. And she said no. Before the very eyes they mutilated this baby. Some of them went very slowly. They would open the baby below the sternum down. Now you think of what's happening to this little baby, and reached and grabbed the baby's entrails and pulled them out. Of course that's going to drive the woman wild. Or they would take the head, or they would cut off the hands and the elbow. This was sickening. I wanted to wake up, but I could not. As she said she would deny, they put the knife in her hand and said, prove it. do to your baby what we're going to do to you. And some of them just passed out. They could not do it. Well, they took her away, and as she did, they laughed in her face and mocked her for denying her God. Then they threw her in the truck anyways. If this was a man with a wife, they stripped her in front of him. Now you're going to either deny your God, or you're going to watch your wife raped until she's either insane or she goes unconscious. Now if this was the man, they had him stripped too. If he denied, they stood up as if they were going to release her, and one of them slipped up behind her and put a small caliber pistol in the back of her neck, aimed it upwards, pulled the trigger, and blew her brains out on him. Or they did all kinds of hideous things to her, like they were raping her. They were removing her breast. As she was nursing and the baby is there, one of the first things they did is cut her breast off so she could not nurse the child. And they would go through the same process with the child. Let's say here's the husband, here's the wife, and they had a single baby. She would plead with her husband to deny for the sake of the baby. That's the maternal instinct. If he denied, the same thing. They mocked, scoffed, but they thought they could turn him and use him. They would spare him. Then they would turn on the baby. If they thought this was a false turning, they began to cut out the child. Well, she should turn against him. Now they knew they had her, more or less, and she would begin to curse and revile him. In front of her, they castrate him, and then they would beat him mercilessly. And to prove that she had turned, they'd tell her, go ahead and slit your husband's jugular, or open him up from the sternum down, and let the entrails fall out. If she turned, they knew they had her. And you talk about somebody who's demonically crazed, because they had taken her baby, and she had seen what they had done to her husband, and what she had done to him. There was no turning back. She became something like those women in Germany during Nazism in the camps. That's what they would more or less use the woman for. If it was a number of children, they started with the oldest that could plead for their life and worked their way down to the youngest. And what they would do is the heinous crimes of butchering these children while they were alive to get the parents to turn, and very often the parents would turn, and they would put them in yellow trucks. But the children, they separated from them and put them in unmarked trucks so they could raise them and live in the New World Order as part of the New World Order. They were going to try to re-educate them. When they came across the house, Bob's, and they came into our place, this is what they were demanding of others. When they came here, they took us in regular automobile 4 doors, or smaller SUVs, or a small van, and the man behind the seat pulled up what looks like a Sig or a Glock or a Browning and ratcheted it around and put it in the back of my wife's neck. I just moved it around by her ear until it came up to her left temple. And he said, deny Jesus Christ or I'm going to blow your wife's brains out. And then I pleaded with him, do not do this thing. He said, all right, you want your wife to live? Do you want to live? I said, of course. He took the gun out of his hand and put it in mine, and took my wrist and my hand and shoved it up against the barrel with a temple. I said, I will not do this. He reached in where the trigger finger was and pulled the trigger, and actually saw my wife's brains come out all over the side. This is what they were doing with the men and women as those who were ministers of the gospel. They were being told that they had to kill their wife in order to survive. As for the Jews, they were being told when they went into the inn and took them, because every Jew knows what this means. It's happening again, and there's nothing you, Jews, can do about it. They were dragging them away, especially the women and the children, screaming and hollering and pleading, please do not do this thing. This cannot happen in America. And they went on to discuss, this cannot happen here. This is a land of the free and the home of the brave. This is a land of democracy. They were mocking them, the Jews, and scoffing at them, saying, not anymore. This is ours. It belongs to us. And one day the black uniformed forces of the NWO